Okay, hello. So this is my video for The Lightning Thief. I have I filmed my reaction to the first 2 episodes, so I'm gonna include, this video is just for episode 1. So yeah, but I'm gonna include some of my reactions to episode 1 here soon. But then I'm also gonna, I'm actually about to watch it again and take some notes on things I have to say that are more than just like first initial reactions. So yeah, this is my Lightning Thief episode 1, I Vaporize My Pre-Algebra Teacher video. It's out. Dude, it's out. I don't need to say anything more. I've been waiting for this for 3 years. All I will say, Percy Jackson and you are so important to me. I've made some of my best friends in the entire world because of it. I've got my beads with the college ring. This is literally just like a ring, but I got the beads. You can't see them. I made these myself. I can't have the shirt. I'm ready. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. Them swapping their lunch. Mr. Kane, what? Olivia Rodrigo is logical. What the? Oh my god. He's scared. D'Angelo's. Jesus. Okay. They are very far from camp. Okay, so I'm gonna be doing my little analysis breakdown of episode 1. I have my notes. Yeah, basically, so obviously saw my reaction. Now I'm gonna be doing these videos for every episode, so this is the structure. So it'll start with my reaction, then right now I'm gonna start with any complaints at all I have about an episode, then just a general, it's like my favorite parts of the episode, but it's basically just a recap because like I have so many favorite parts. So then like recap things I loved about the episode, and then major themes in each episode is sort of how I'm gonna structure these videos, so you know. So yeah, so obviously, okay, episode 1, accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. These are my complaints. I have 3, and some of these like literally don't matter, but I just was coming up with stuff. My first, this isn't really a complaint, this is just something that I was like, it's an interesting choice, and it's Grover like ratting out Percy to the principal. And it's like, I think in the end I sort of understand it. It's a little moment of like conflict, of like Percy's last friend sort of betraying him and all this stuff. And, you know, Grover just, in the end, he explains it because he was like, I just had to get you out of that school. And so it like makes sense in the end, but I just, like, I don't think it's super necessary, but it's like the added drama, like, I'm fine with. But it just felt like really weird in the moment because I was like, whoa, that's a lot. But yeah, that's number one. Number two is that they cut out the Fates with the string cutting. That's like, I mean, it's not like one of my favorite parts of the book, but it's a part of the book that I'm like, I love how it like ties into the end of the series, but I do understand that like within the Lightning Thief, the whole Fates cutting the string doesn't really make sense. So like I get it, I get why they cut it, but I miss it. I love that little drama where he literally thinks he's like gonna die. Anyway, and then my third and final complaint for the first episode is sort of like Gabe in general. Now, I think it depends on how they, like, Gabe comes back at the end of the book, and so I think Gabe will come back in the end, like maybe episode 8 or episode 7, and so I think it kind of depends on what happens when he comes back. This is like hard to explain, but like basically in the end of the book, Percy like realizes that Gabe abuses his mom physically, like that he hits Sally, and that's like a big moment for Percy. And so I'm like, if they do that at the end of this season, then I'll be like, okay, I'm back here, I'm back with you. But right now, Gabe is like not as awful as he was in the books. Like in the book, he literally, like, Percy walks in, Gabe's immediately like asking him for money to play poker and all this stuff, and he's just like really horrible. In the show, he's sort of like, he's annoying and he's like not a good father figure, but he's sort of like, he's more like pathetic and like a loser than he is in the book. And so like I think he's really funny in the show, and so it's like still entertaining and like I enjoy it, but I just don't know how they're gonna finish that out, because like in the book she like kills him, and so I'm like, in the show it's like he's not really that bad, but if they finish it out with him being abusive too, then like absolutely kill him. So those are my 3 complaints. That's all I could think of. Yeah, so that's all we got. Next, okay, now we're just gonna go through the entire episode, and I'm gonna let you know the stuff I loved, and all my thoughts on everything they're doing. So yeah, I sort of split this up into like the opening scene, everything at Yancy Academy, everything at the apartment, stuff in Montauk, stuff with the Minotaur fight, and then like the very end at camp, kind of. So we'll get into it. So first of all, in like the exposition shot, I love how it started with like him like in the rain, and it's like all dark and it's like blurry, and it's like the lines directly from the book that he's just like saying in a voiceover, and then it slowly like focuses on Percy's face. It's so good. And then basically in the beginning of episode 1, it's sort of like a flashback sort of thing, and it's just going throughout Percy's life of all the stuff that he's experienced that has led him to where we meet him as a 12-year-old in the moment. And it's just like, it's like low-key, there's some shots, especially when they do like the shaky cam, or like, I don't know, but in the very beginning of episode 1, there's this shot of like a teacher running down a hallway and then like running up the stairs, and it's all like slow-mo and like shaky, and it's like very cinematic and it's like beautiful. So like shout out to them for that. I love that. And then Percy's like on the roof and he sees Blackjack. It's like a Pegasus, but like it could be Blackjack. And so yeah, it's just like, it's him in 2nd grade. By the way, the casting for the younger Walker, so good. He looks exactly like him. But yeah, and it's basically Percy's doing a voiceover throughout the whole thing, and what was I gonna say? Oh, so he's like in the cafeteria at the lunch table, and there's this part where he looks out the window and he sees a it's a hippopotamus, but it's like a magical creature. And I'm pretty sure we see the creature at some point in a different book. I don't know what book, but he sees this hippo. And then like he looks away and then he looks back and it's like it's shown as like a garbage truck. And it's just like there's these little moments where they show the mist in action and it's so good. So I love that. And so that's basically just like the whole setup of him being like, I've been like weird and like I've been seeing things my whole life and I've been getting kicked out of schools for it and like all this stuff. And it leads us to right now, him at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And there's it's actually maybe my favorite moment of episode 1 where he's talking about how like lonely he felt and how he never like really understood it until he met Grover, and then it cuts to him and Grover sitting at lunch together, and it's just such beautiful warm lighting, and they're just like sitting there and they're laughing and they don't care about anyone else and they're just having fun, and that's so good. I love it. And like they really show, like in the books it was sort of like a weird dynamic of like Percy was always like protecting Grover from like bullies and stuff, and like obviously so sweet, but here it shows them as like genuine like friends, like they enjoy each other's company and we love to see it. There's also a Mythomagic cameo. Love it, because Mythomagic cards, they show up for the first time in the Titan's Curse in the books, and then like at some point in Heroes of Olympus, I know Frank is like, I love Mythomagic cards. It's like it's a thing that exists in the world, but we never really see it that much. And so for Percy and Grover to be playing Mythomagic from the start, that's so good. I love it. And then Percy's obviously in the museum, and the flashback. There's a flashback of him and Sally, which is not in the books, and it might honestly be like one of the most important moments ever. Because like, okay, she says some crazy lines that are like so good. She says they're looking at the statue of Perseus and Medusa, and Percy's like, oh my god, I was named after him because he was a hero. And she says, not everyone who looks like a hero is a hero, and not everyone who looks like a monster is a monster, which is a huge theme. Not only like huge theme in episode 3 that comes back with Medusa, also just huge theme of Percy Jackson in general, but also huge theme of Sun and the Star, which I assume like as for Rick was, but I don't know when he started writing that, but like I feel like the show might have had some sort of inspiration for the Sun and the Star, because it's all about like Nico and Will, and like Nico seeing the underworld as like not a super negative thing, and all the monsters he sees as like not necessarily monsters, like Bob for example, and other people that they meet along the way. I can't get into that right now, but that's a huge theme to be dropped in the first episode. Like, love it. And then she also says, hold fast, Perseus, brave the storm that was meant to break us, for we are unbreakable, which is so beautiful. So the way they did Sally is so good. Like, I'm sick. There's also a reference to there's a reference to a Mr. Kane, which like there's no Mr. Kane in the books, and so I have to assume they're talking about Kane from like Kane Chronicles. So I don't know what to say about that, but like the connections are here. Another thing, there's like so many beautiful little details when we like cut to them at like lunchtime, and there's not even like words exchanged between them, but Percy and Grover immediately like open their sandwiches and like switch the toppings on their sandwiches, because Grover's a vegetarian and they don't give him a vegetarian sandwich, and so like Percy takes the meat off of like his sandwiches and gives him his cheese. It's like It's so cute. And then so they're like at lunch, whatever, and then Percy obviously like goes off and he doesn't push Nancy into the fountain, but like he uses his little Poseidon powers to like do the water and stuff. And then we get the Mrs. Dodds scene, which I will say, I love how short it was. Like truly, like we know what the Mrs. Dodds scene is. We don't need it to be a drawn out battle. We already have the Minotaur fight. Like Mrs. Dodds does not need to be that big of a deal. Truly, it just needs to be like showing that Percy is in danger, and he is. And it's so crazy like how they did it with the transformation, as like it's Mrs. Dodds and then like a kid walks in front of her and then like a new piece of like a monster shows up on her and as she turns into Electo. So good. Or Electro, I don't actually know which one she is, but yeah. And then so like the whole thing with Mrs. Dodds happens, and then Percy, like everyone starts acting like they don't know who Mrs. Dodds is, which is like still the craziest gaslighting I've ever seen. Kind of goes to show Chiron is like a little, like, for Chiron to do that to him. Chiron has always made me mad in the beginning of The Lightning Thief, because he's expecting Percy to know stuff that like he obviously wouldn't know. And like expecting him to not think that he's like going insane, which is like a whole other thing. But basically he gets taken to the principal's office, and he is just like, the principal's like, we know you don't think you touched Nancy, but like, do you have anything else to say for yourself? And Percy's just like, I didn't push Nancy. Like, I'm sorry. And he's just like, I didn't. And he's not gonna lie and say that he did, because he didn't. So yeah, and then Grover like rats him out, and Percy feels very sad and betrayed. Sort of like last straw for him. And so he's getting kicked out of school. He's like sitting on the bench on the way to go home, and then Chiron comes out, or Mr. Bruner, sorry. But he comes out and he starts talking to Percy, and Percy says this line, and he says, I don't need any more stories about how special I don't realize I am. They aren't helping. And I love that, because I'm sure he heard that a lot. Like, you know, you're just like different, you're just special. And he's just like, girl, like it doesn't help. So I love that line. Okay, and then he goes home, basically. He shows up at his apartment, and immediately, so funny, the plumber, which is named Eddie, which in the books, Eddie was one of the like poker friends, but now he's like the plumber, and he's like very like team Percy, not team Gabe. So interesting change, but like love it. And so like there's this conversation happening inside the apartment that Percy can hear from the hallway as he's walking into like the hallway of the apartment. And basically it's the plumber talking to Eddie. I mean, no, the plumber talking to Gabe. And Gabe is like, he literally like, he clogged the toilet is essentially what's happening. And he's like, you need to eat more fruit. And then he's like, you need to see a doctor. And Gabe is like, maybe I am a doctor. It's very funny. Yeah. And then there's this whole scene with Gabe, which is very funny, but like he's like kind of chill. Like he's not chill, but he's like not as horrible as he was in the books. He says some very funny lines, like Percy says like, your roof, my mom's the only one employed here. Love it. There's also like Percy says something about like playing playing imaginary poker, I think is what he says. And then Gabe says, you wouldn't understand it, you're a child. It's so funny. Yeah. And then Percy gets a little more into the apartment, and that's when we meet Sally in like not a flashback. And Sally is sitting on the fire escape of their apartment in the pouring rain, listening to Logical by Olivia Rodrigo. Listening to Logical, which I just need to, just like, that song is such a crazy choice, because obviously she would think about like her and Poseidon, but also there's a line in the end of the song where she says, okay, what's the lyrics? It's love is never logical, I know I'm half responsible, and that makes me feel horrible. And then it's like, logical, love's never logical, I know I could have stopped it all, God, why didn't I stop it all? And just like thinking about that in like the context of Percy's like home situation, her feeling like responsible for him having like a bad life because like Gabe's there. I'm just saying, there's a lot of meanings. And so I think Logical was a great song to include. Anyway, so Percy shows up and Sally comes out to like meet him, and she's like, oh yeah, I got a call from the school that you got expelled, and he just like keeps repeating, it really wasn't my fault, because it wasn't, like it really wasn't. It's so sad. And he just like doesn't want his mom to be like upset with him, because like obviously it's hard on her that he has to keep switching schools and all this stuff, and it's so, but like their bond is shown so immediately and it's so good. I love it. Yeah. And then he like literally thinks he's going insane. Like he's like talking about it and he's like, I'm literally like, I need help. And he like, I don't remember if this is at this point or later in the Montauk part, but he literally is like, he's like begging her for like help because he thinks that he's like seeing stuff that isn't there, and he's like genuinely concerned, all this stuff. But then she's like, we're just gonna go to Montauk, get away for the weekend, because we need to talk about some stuff. And like he's like, okay, but like she's like being weird about it and all this stuff. I will say at some point when she's talking to Gabe, the dynamic between Sally and Gabe feels so different in the show, because Sally is like such a like, she's such her own person, and she's like not scared of Gabe like she was in the books, which I support. I think that's great. But there's this part where she mentions like a sandwich shop or something called D'Angelo's. Which like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what we're supposed to take from that. But them just dropping like D'Angelo's, the name D'Angelo's in episode 1, I was like, y'all know what you're doing. That was crazy. Yeah. And then basically before Montauk, Percy like falls asleep in the car, I'm pretty sure, and he has this weird dream. He's like in a barren land and there's a voice. And I don't really remember what the voice said, but I assume it's Kronos. Like, you just gotta assume, right? I actually don't know for sure. But like, I don't know who would be other than Kronos. But yeah, there's some spooky figure speaking to him. It literally looks like the Ghost of Christmas, like future or whatever. Yeah. Okay, then we get to the Montauk house. He wakes up in the car. First of all, Sally is like, when he wakes up, Sally has tears rolling down her face as she's driving, which is just a crazy detail. And her like wiping them away as he wakes up. No. Okay. And then basically the main thing that happens in the Montauk house is like, they show up, they're having a good time. It's like their house that they've been always come to forever. It's the house where she met Poseidon, but like he doesn't know that yet. There's this really funny line about her being like, why do you think we come to this house specifically, like every year or whatever? And he's like, because it's like really close to the septic tank, so it's cheap. Which is funny. But then basically the whole scene is basically her trying to explain to him that he's a demigod and that his father is a god. And this has always been a question of mine, even like with the books, is like, Sally had to have known that it was Poseidon, right? Like, she knew, but she didn't tell him. Like, she could have literally just told him, but whatever. Yeah. But basically they have this whole talk about like him being a demigod, and he at this point literally thinks that he's like not mentally stable, and he's like, this isn't making it help. Like, he's upset at this point because he is like, he literally feels like he's going insane, and he thinks that she's like adding on to these delusions, and he's just so upset, and it's such an emotional scene. It's really great. There's also this part where she says like, I fell in love with a god, and he says, God, like Jesus? You fell in love with Jesus? Which, love it. And yeah, and he's just like, you're making this worse. Like, stop telling me that my dad is God. Then Grover shows up. He has goat legs. Percy's freaking out. It's this whole thing, but he's like, we need to get in the car because you're being chased. So they hop in the car, and then this is the whole Minotaur scene. As they're in the car, Grover's sort of explaining more of the pieces that Sally didn't explain, and so Grover's like, we're taking you to camp, it's where you'll be safe, I'm a satyr, and he goes, I'm actually 24, in like such a deadpan way, and it's so quick, and it's so funny. It's like one of my favorite, like, it's so underrated, the way he says like, I'm actually 24. It's so funny. Yeah, and then the car crashes. I'm actually not sure what part she says this, but at some point, Sally, I'm pretty sure it's like when they're out in the woods, and Sally is like, you two go, I'm staying back. And Percy's like, you're not staying back, you're coming with us. And she's like, I can't. And she says to him, quote, you are not broken, you are singular, you are a miracle, you are my son. Sally Jackson, the woman you are. That is so crazy. It's just, she loves him so much. It's so cute. And then, inevitably, Sally Jackson, well, she doesn't actually die. The Minotaur picks her up as Percy's watching from afar, and she fades into gold dust. The same way that Mrs. Dodds did, you know. And so Percy thinks that she has died. And Percy's not having it. And so he takes his pen, his pops out his Riptide, and a Cluesmos, and he fights the Minotaur. Yeah. And he fights the Minotaur, and he cuts off the horn, and then he kills it. And he's just like in a fit of rage. And I've always loved this detail about this scene, is that it's raining when it happens, which, like, I feel like people don't recognize that. Like, maybe they do, maybe I'm just the stupid one, but for a long time I didn't realize that, like, Percy was able to do all that because it was raining, because, like, the water. I always thought it was just, like, because he was so enraged about his mom dying, but, like, no, it's because it's raining, babe. Like, he's, like, powered up. It's so good. And so basically then the rest of the episode is like the last minute, and it's him, he's passed out, but he like shows up at camp, and he's just like very like daisy, and every like person that he sees is just like a silhouette, because like the sun is rising, it's like dawn, and we basically just hear like this voiceover of a girl, Annabeth, saying he must be the one, and like we're like, what does that mean? Me saying we as if I haven't read this 20 times. But then she's like, he must be the one. And then Chiron's like, hush, Annabeth. And then he's like, welcome to camp. We've been expecting you. And all the gag and the goop of it all. And then that's the end of the episode. It's so good. It hits every beat it needs to. And most of all, it shows him and Sally's relationship, which is literally the entire driving force behind this entire season. So, like, you know, it's perfect. Yeah. And then the main, like, themes of this episode that I think are so hit hard and, like, hit well on are, like, what really are monsters and heroes, you know? Like, this is sort of, it's literally, like, a theme throughout every Percy Jackson book of like the monsters, like what are the monsters? They're the ones that lose, and so it's like, are they really like so horrible? Because like the gods are horrible, the gods who are supposed to be like the heroes, and all the heroes, and even like later, and I'm gonna talk about Hercules in my next video, but like Hercules comes back in Heroes of Olympus, and he's like not a great person. Even in like Trials of Apollo, not a great person in the beginning. So it's all this stuff of like, are these heroes really that great? And are the gods really that great? And are these monsters really so horrible? Or are they victims? Which comes back in episode 3. And then another theme that I thought was hit really well in this episode, that wasn't hit so hard in the books maybe, is Percy literally just like being scared and thinking that he's crazy. Like him seeing all this stuff that no one else sees, everyone gaslighting him, and him just being like, I am not okay, like I need help. Like like it's too much. So yeah, this first episode, I think it's perfect. I had 3 complaints and none of them were really that like earth-shattering to me, so I don't know what to say. It was a very solid start. I love it. I love the Olivia Rodrigo feature. That's all.